This next story takes me back to 1984 when I first went to West Africa with the Peace Corps. One of the things I was required to read in my training was Things Fall Apart by Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe. I was in French-speaking Togo, though, and had to read it in French, and that really shows how important that novel was to the whole African continent. Achebe told the classic African post-independence story. Well, we learned today that Chinua Achebe has died at the age of 82. B. Bandele is a Nigerian novelist, playwright, and screenwriter who now lives in London. In 1997, he adapted Things Fall Apart for the British stage. B. You were born in 1967. Things Fall Apart came out in 58. And the book and Achebe were well known when you were a kid, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. What was your first encounter with his writing?
Oh, I first encountered Things Fall Apart when I was about 7, maybe 8 years old. It was one of the very first novels I read, and it was definitely one of the reasons I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid.
So a huge impact.
Absolutely. One of the most important books for me and for a whole generation of African writers.
Yeah, why was that?
I actually think it's Achebe's best work. He wrote it when he was about 26, and it's almost, for me, it's just flawless. It's a masterpiece. It's his masterpiece.
Remind us of the plot of the novel before we go on. It's basically the tension between a traditional Nigerian father and the modern son. But what happens?
Well, the central character is a very tempestuous, very ambitious, ill-tempered man called Okonkwo. He confronts Europeans. It's the first time Europeans come to Igbo land, to that part of Nigeria, with the colonialists come Christian missionaries who build churches and convert people to Christianity. And Okonkwo decides to resist, and his decision has results in very tragic consequences for him.
So a simple story, it seems, but if you say it's Achebe's best work, what was it about the story or style that so affected you?
I think for me, when I first read it, and it's one of those books I quite frequently reread, it's just got a great simplicity. It's deceptively simple. But beyond the simplicity is a great resonance. It's the more you read it, the more it reveals itself to you.
I mean, I've heard the experience from others, and I've lived it myself. The first time a Westerner visits West Africa, there's a strong chance that someone will push Things Fall Apart into your hands. Why is it so important for Africans to have non-Africans read it?
Well, Achebe himself said he was compelled to write it as a reaction to writers such as Conrad.
Joseph Conrad.
Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, especially. For Conrad, Africa is one endless night. And Achebe wanted to respond to that and say, well, we're not perfect. We're just only as messed up as any other race of human beings. And so he wrote a book where every single character in it is just very complex. And I think in the complexity of his characters, a lot of us see ourselves, we're able to identify with those characters. And so quite often when a foreigner comes to Nigeria, inevitably they get given a copy.
Right. So when you were 7 and reading this book as a kid, I mean, who did you identify with?
To be honest, I just wanted to be Achebe. I wanted to be the writer. It was about the world that I didn't know. It was set at least 100 years before I was born.
You adapted Things Fall Apart for the British stage in 1997. I mean, in a way, that's kind of another version of kind of putting the novel in a Westerner's hand. Is that why you did it?
Actually, yeah, I'm an enthusiast. If I love a book or I love a story, I want everyone to read it. I want everyone to experience it. And it took me nearly 3 years to convince the theatres here in the UK to put on a production of that adaptation. And we did it, and it was incredibly successful. It went to the States as well. It was on in Washington, D.C.
Did Chinua Achebe ever see your show?
He did see it, and I wasn't there the night he came to see it in Washington, D.C., but he apparently loved it. I met him just once. He came to London here, and there was a reception for him in a bookshop, and I was in a queue of about maybe 1,000 people.
Oh, my.
who basically lined up to shake his hand, and that was the closest I came to meeting him.
Did you have any moment to converse with him when you shook
No,
his hand?
it was just good evening, Professor Achebe, and shook his
Did he connect that you were the man who had staged the play?
Yes. I
Yeah,
mean,
he
I
did.
spoke to him actually a few times on the phone,
Right.
so he did know.
B.E. Bandele, a Nigerian-born writer and playwright, he's just finished directing his first film, an adaptation of fellow Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's novel, Half of a Yellow Sun. B., thanks very much.
Thank you.
In 2010, Chinua Achebe spoke with the BBC on Nigeria's 50th anniversary. Here's a clip from that interview.
Nigeria had a very interesting beginning. We had a lot of expectation about how it was going to fare and how good things would become, and our freedom and independence was very real to us. Unfortunately, it has not worked out that way. If I've given the impression that I excuse myself or people like myself, I do not excuse anybody. There is enough blame to go around. But those who offer themselves for leadership and are put in a position and given the resources, these people must take the fundamental blame for what's happened.
However dark his thoughts about Nigeria's present situation, it's uplifting to know that Chinua Achebe was ultimately hopeful for the future of Nigerians.
Don't give up, and don't let anybody push you around. We are not fools. Nigerians are brilliant people. My best wishes to Nigeria on our 50th anniversary. The next anniversary will be great if we say so. Thank you.
Chinua Achebe died yesterday in Boston. He was 82. You can hear a recording of Achebe reading from his groundbreaking novel, Things Fall Apart, and watch a documentary about his return to Nigeria after a 20-year absence. That's allattheworld.org.